Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Let's talk about the other big story that we want to bring to you this evening. Elon Musk's Twitter takeover has not been short of controversies. Adding to the list now is what is being called as the exposure of truth at Twitter, called Twitter Files. Interestingly, this is being exposed by Elon Musk himself. Now, these Twitter files show decisions that have been taken by some Twitter executives to suit a certain narrative and agenda. If part 1 was all about Hunter Biden, part 2, which was put out on Friday, talks about the platform's much talked about shadow ban policy. The thread, which was put out by an independent journalist, says that some Twitter teams worked to reduce the reach and visibility of certain pro-right-wing accounts in the United States. Part 2 reveals how some conservative accounts, including that of a talk show host and even a Stanford University's anti-COVID lockdown advocate, were targeted for suppression by Twitter. But these claims against the microblogging site aren't really new. If you go back to 2018, at that time, Twitter's Vijay Gade, who was then the head of legal policy and trust and even the head of product, had in fact refuted similar allegations when they said, and I'm quoting, "We do not shadow ban and we certainly do not shadow ban based on political viewpoints or ideology," end quote. On Friday, the expose said that the group that decided whether to limit the reach of certain users was in fact called the Strategic Response Team Global Escalation, which handled as many as 200 cases a day. Revealing the names of the members in the secret group, the expose said the secret group included the head of legal policy and trust, Vijay Gade, the global head of trust and safety, and the subsequent CEOs as well, so Jack Dorsey and Parag Agarwal. However, many have already pointed out that these so-called exposes do not really reveal anything new. Twitter's former head of products has also replied to this thread which has been put out, saying the company never shadow banned anyone. What they did was de-amplification of certain tweets, and he's calling all of this manufactured drama. So the larger question is, what Elon Musk is doing, is this just pure business or is this actually a cleanup? Let me quickly bring you up to speed of what did we see in this part 2, which was put out by this independent journalist Barry Weiss. First, it went on to say teams of employees built blacklists. It also further went on to say it disfavored tweets prevented from trending as well. Then the visibility of the accounts and the trending topics was actively limited as well. Shadow banning, active visibility filtering became a reality. Filtering enforced by a strategic response team, and I gave you the members of that team as well. Rank and file level moderation as Twitter policy. We control amplification of your content quite a bit. But many are now saying this really isn't the first time. So let's now talk to you about some voices which have in fact been targeted by Twitter. And this is what we've seen in this part 2 as well. First one, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. Who is he? He's not a political person. He's from Stanford. He argued that COVID lockdowns would harm children. He was placed on the Trends blacklist. The tweets won't trend at all. Target 2. Dan Bongino, a right-wing talk show host, slapped with search blacklist, which means the tweets will not be searchable. Target 3. Charlie Kirk, conservative activist, account set to do not amplify. The most interesting is this, libs of TikTok. They were only retweeting tweets. Accounts put on Trends blacklist designated do not take action without consulting the others. And there are many others like Shaya Rashid, huge following, but 6 suspensions in 2022 accused of hateful conduct. So the larger question that we're asking is, are many dark truths and agendas, do they stand exposed now with the kind of Twitter files that have been put out on the microblogging platform? Let me also now bring in our guest to take this conversation forward. We have Dr. Human David Himati, science author and commentator. We also have Dr. Makar Khan, who is a professor, JNU, and political commentator. Good to have both of you on the broadcast with us. Dr. Himati, I'd like to begin the conversation with you. There was a lot of interest as far as these exposes were concerned. But today we saw one very interesting name, which was of Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. Now, he was not a politician, was not aligned as far as any political party is concerned, Why do you think his tweets were suppressed?
Dr. Jay Bhattacharya is a prominent physician, statistician, epidemiologist, and researcher at Stanford University. And when the COVID pandemic began and when the lockdown proposals and the actual lockdowns happened, what Dr. Bhattacharya and several of his other colleagues wrote was a document called the Great Barrington Declaration, in which they proposed, and in fact almost insisted, that they focus the protection on those who we knew were at risk, the elderly and people who were sick and immunocompromised, rather than shutting down all of society to try to prevent people who weren't at risk from getting the virus. And what happened was this was completely against what the government's narrative was in the United States, as well as many other parts of the world. And the people in power really felt threatened, and they couldn't engage in a debate with him. They didn't want a debate. Rather, they chose to silence him so that his voice, as well as the voices of his colleagues who were in complete agreement, were suppressed and not heard, so that the voice of the government was really the only voice available.
I also want to understand from you, when the suppression happened, looking back, how dangerous do you think it was to suppress a voice of science? Because I thought science involved a lot of debate. So once you suppress the voice of science at a time when we were dealing with such a strange and dangerous pandemic, how dangerous was it looking back?
It's impossible to exaggerate how dangerous this actually was, because medical science, as you said, is the product of discussion and, in fact, open debate. And when there's only one side, especially at a time when it was early in the pandemic and we had no information, right? When things were continually evolving every single day, that was the time at which it was really essential for there to be multiple voices, especially prominent voices from Stanford faculty member who was actually an expert in this exact area. And so when we suppress people who are actual experts, who spend their lives studying this and understanding these sorts of phenomena, that's really dangerous, because this is not just simply a political issue. In fact, it is not a political issue. Public health should be depoliticized and really be focused on science rather than any political factors. Unfortunately, the politicians hijacked this conversation and said it is either our voice or no voice. And for many years, that's what they did.
Dr. Makarand, I want to bring you in the conversation as well. And I just want to kick things off by understanding, is this Elon Musk being a businessman? Because this is what he said on day one, that I'm here to make money. Or do you think this is a cleanup that was required?
Well, it's both. Making money is not a crime. And if you buy a platform for 44 billion, you don't want to lose money. He was losing, I think, something like 400 million a day. So let's not say that if you want to make money, it's bad. But the cleanup was absolutely necessary to restore confidence. In fact, I want to go a step farther. We've been talking about the two Twitter files, the two sets of revelations, the latest by Barry Weiss. The earlier one was on Hunter Biden.
Yeah.
But I think all paid content should be properly labeled, because people should not be deceived. You described the former Twitter, legal policy, trust and safety, person, Vijaya Gade. Trust. She's supposed to induce trust, and you can't trust them because they're mislabeling everything, and they're influencing public opinion, sometimes falsifying information. This is very dangerous. But I want to put it in context. What I wanted to say was that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Media bias. In fact, there are slant indexes. This has been documented for decades now. There have been books and papers on this. And we know, by and large, I want to bring it back to politics just for a moment, because, public health and politics cannot be divorced.
True.
Look at all the stuff that Dr. Fauci put out, A lot of it was shown to be so contaminated. Apparently, he had his own interests in that Wuhan lab. So what I'm trying to say is the greatest safeguard of democracy is the free flow and availability of reliable information, because the public needs to be informed. And whenever you sledge that and try to suppress things and influence people in a certain way, it's really very dangerous. And let's not forget, in India, too, Cambridge Analytica, they were trying to find the formula to really win elections or defeat people whom they found, as it were, unacceptable, including our present Prime Minister. And I can assure you, Ridhima, as we come closer to the 2024 general elections, this barrage of political misinformation, targeted, you might call it weaponized information against particular dispensations or parties or politicians or ideologies is only going to get amplified because without being conspiracy theorists, we have to see this huge nexus.
Yeah, but this is where the criticism is also coming in, and I want to bring in Dr. Hemati back in the conversation. What do you say to critics who are saying that, you're seeing a very micro picture? We still don't know the extent. We still don't know all the names who were part as far as the suppression or restriction is concerned. And also to the kind of defense that we've seen from Twitter officials in the past, that this is not shadow ban. This is just de-amplification.
Look, I think this is exactly what our other guest has said here. This is the tip of the iceberg here. We have a lot more to see, and I think we're going to begin to see that trickling through over the next several weeks or even months. Elon Musk is a very smart businessman. He is doing this, A, to expose the censorship, and B, remember, he spent a lot of money purchasing Twitter. He has an obligation to his shareholders as well as himself, who went in on this deal, to bring up the value of Twitter, to increase its value by increasing trust in the system, by drawing views to the platform and encouraging people to utilize it. By releasing all the information all at once, he's not going to achieve that. It does him a lot more benefit. It does all of us actually benefit as well to have this information come out over time so it can be thoughtfully analyzed and really put into context. So I would expect that over the next several weeks and months, we're going to see a lot more coming out. What we saw coming through yesterday is simply the very beginning. Those are some of the more egregious violations. But if they have data like that on just a handful of individuals, imagine how much they have on people not only in the United States, but perhaps around the world.
Absolutely.
As well as
and that's got a lot of interest back here in India as well, where people are now demanding that there should be an India version of the Twitter files as well. But Dr. Makarand, what I'm essentially trying to understand, one, of course, we did see Jack Dorsey also urging Elon Musk to put it all out now and put it all out together. But I find it difficult to believe that it will happen like that as far as the monetary aspect is concerned. But I want to understand two things from you. One, Elon Musk also kind of shielded Jack Dorsey when he said there was a lot of information that was hidden possibly from you as well. Is it a possibility that this entire group was working in a silo and the CEO didn't know what was happening? Because the kind of names that we're looking at, you even have the FBI now having access as far as these lists are concerned.
See, I am very uncomfortable with such, defenses, because if you're the CEO and you don't know what's happening in your company, that actually shows you to be a bad leader. I think it's an evasion of responsibility. As the popular saying goes, the buck stops with the person in charge. And you earlier said, non-amplification versus shadow banning. Parato, what are we talking about? This is just verbal juggling to get away from something that was, I would say, malign and malicious and needed to be exposed, because it's really a matter of deception. You're deceiving the public. You are claiming to do something and you're doing something entirely different. You have an agenda, and it's motivated, it's ideological, but perhaps worse, it's bought, it's commercial. You have fake handles, you've got propaganda. I just want to tell you, I've started teaching, my new MA course, and it's amazing. These young people who are all 21, they are all reading George Orwell. I said, what did you read in the last couple months? Everybody is reading, 1984, Big Brother's watching you, surveillance, data mapping, big data mining, AI. Young people are very conscious of how they're being manipulated. So in that sense, what Musk is doing is really important. And we need to do this kind of cleansing.
True.
We have to take
that's an important point that you're making as far as accountability of even the platform is concerned. We also have Pawan Duggal, cyber law expert, also now joining us. Pawan, what I want to understand, this again brings us back to the accountability as far as the platform is concerned. Now, of course, we're talking about Twitter as pre-Musk era and post-Musk era. So what is the accountability as far as the microblogging platform itself is concerned? Shouldn't there be a mechanism where if your account has been shadow banned or restricted, it should automatically notify the user, which of course hasn't happened in past cases?
Clearly, Twitter is hiding behind the statutory exemption from legal liability that it actually gets under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act in the US. It says it's a US company. It's governed by US laws, and the US law guarantees that they cannot be held liable for any third-party data. But the moment you come to a country like India, where they're governed by the Indian Information Technology Act 2000, you quickly realize that the government is trying to make them more accountable in the sense that they will have to potentially show the exercise of due diligence before they can actually claim any statutory exemption from legal liability. But what's currently coming out is skeletons out of the cupboard. And these skeletons are only telling us that not everything is hunky-dory. Not everything is as sacred on these platforms as we think it is. And therefore, there's a need for far more accountability, transparency, and responsibility that's required from these platforms. Unfortunately, these platforms have had a long period of honeymoon under the legal frameworks, including under the Indian cyber law. But I think that's honeymoon coming to an end. It's time for them to realize the writing on the wall, that the quicker they're able to be more transparent, more accountable, and more responsible, the more they're going to benefit in terms of having more users and also having a bigger market share.
True. Dr. Himati, I want to bring you in and I want to talk to you about the other criticism that is coming in where many are saying that, today you're saying that right voices have been muzzled, but we don't even know the amount of left voices that were possibly included in this list as well. Because if we're working with the assumption that it was just the secret group that was working and the CEO himself also had no idea, then who knows what were the kind of voices that were involved in this list?
Exactly. I wanted to come in on what Mr. Dugal was saying also.
I was actually acting Dr. Himati, but go ahead. I'll get to him in just a bit. Go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to say one little thing because I myself was deplatformed and for 2 months I was shut out and I never found out why. Actually, they asked me to verify my account, re-verify. I had a blue tick account.
Okay.
And I gave my telephone number and I never got the OTP. And believe me, there are forms to be filled. There's no human being at the end of any tunnel. Nobody is responsible. You keep filling forms. You keep giving evidence. It took 2 months for them to sort it out.
So if we're saying part 2 was just tip of the iceberg, Dr. Himati, I'll give you the final word. What do you think we can see in part 3 then?
Part 3, it remains to be seen. I think what we've seen thus far is evidence of government getting political voices being silenced. I think we've seen evidence of, this is U.S. government, we've seen evidence of Twitter internally censoring people who have political views and different views on COVID. I think we have yet to now see evidence of foreign government involvements outside the United States. I'm certain we'll see that. I'm certain we'll see evidence of the U.S. government directly ordering Twitter to suppress certain voices regarding COVID. So some of what we see coming out last night from the Twitter files, we're probably going to see some government involvement. And I would bet that we're going to eventually go down a path where we see evidence that there was government involvement in censorship, not only on Twitter, but across many other platforms. Don't forget, Twitter was only one of multiple different social media platforms. This includes YouTube, this includes Facebook, so many others. And what we know for fact is that many voices, just the same voices, in fact, were being suppressed across all these social media platforms. These platforms were not owned by the same entities. So how did that happen? There's a common thread, and that common thread is not only a political one, but it also points to where these platforms are based, which is in the United States.
I think that's a very important point that you're making. Not just political voices, not just restricted to the United States. So will we see other regions being involved in the lists and the exposes that will follow? Unfortunately, completely run out of time. I will have to leave the conversation there. I'd like to thank all our guests. With that, it's a wrap from my side. Zaka is up next with Prostax.